Hi everyone, welcome to Swinburne's Alumni Impact Interviews. I'm Louise McCarthy, Director of Alumni and Operations, and I'm pleased you could join us for this second in the series. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Bunurong people, the traditional custodians of the land where I'm located. I'd also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of the land where Swinburne's Hawthorn campus is located in Melbourne. I pay my respects to all elders, past, present and emerging, and hope that the path towards reconciliation will be shared and embraced. Our Alumni Impact Interviews are showcasing Swinburne alumni who are pivoting through a very challenging year, and they're an inspiration to all of us. And who better to moderate interviews with alumni than another Swinburne alum, Andrew Ford. Andrew started his career straight out of high school into his grandparents' company as a jack of all trades. Now, after a decade of leading digital marketing strategies for some of the world's largest companies, Andrew has turned his attention to discovering how people could best use social media and digital technologies to lead more fulfilling lives. Having founded Social Star in 2009, check it out, Andrew now helps amplify businesses, leaders, and entrepreneurs through personal branding using those same strategies. Andrew has completed several business degrees, including a Master of Entrepreneurship at Swinburne, where he now also shares his knowledge as a digital marketing, professional development, and brand management lecturer. In today's interview, Andrew speaks with Swinburne alum Jen Sharpe, who is the founder and managing director of Think HQ, a communications agency that is grounded in its values and its commitment to only working on projects that lead to positive social benefit. Jen also founded the company Lumen, an online training website specialising in marketing, communications, media and messaging. And she is also the director of Cultureverse, an accomplished multicultural communications and community engagement consultancy she acquired in 2019. Having launched or acquired 4 businesses to date, 2 that are succeeding and 2 that have failed, Jen can certainly speak to the ups and downs of entrepreneurialism. During her undergraduate degree, Jen studied politics. She also has a graduate diploma in entrepreneurship from Swinburne and won a scholarship to undertake an executive certificate in venture capitalism at Berkeley, California. Thanks, Andrew.
Welcome, Jen. It's such a pleasure to speak to you today. This year's been pretty challenging for everyone. The first thing I want to ask you is, how's 2020 for you so far?
Hello, Andrew, and thanks for having me today. Well, 2020 has been such a massive year. It's had its ups and then its downs, and then for my business, it's certainly been very up. So when COVID hit in March, I had 4 contracts cancel in 1 week, and I was absolutely terrified.
Wow.
And we were able to be agile, and I know that that's a very used word of 2020, but
it's like IT speak.
Yeah, I know. And the reality is our business has actually grew in the end by 80% over the last financial year, and I've employed, I think, about 12 extra people since March. And because of COVID, I actually haven't met a great deal of them
face to face. Yeah.
I've just been querying out computers and learning how to run a team remotely. And so it's been an incredible year. I'm amazed by what the team has achieved. I'm also feeling quite exhausted, as I'm sure a lot of people are.
Yeah, 100%. We're gonna get right into that story, but I wanted to find out just a little bit more about the business, just for people out there, the alumni who are listening. Maybe just introduce the business a bit more. And I know you run a few things. So Think HQ is your main business, but I wanted to find out about the other ones, Lumen and Cultureverse as well. So can you give a bit of a summary of those for us?
Yeah, sure. So this year was actually Think HQ's 10th anniversary.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
I planned for a big party in May, but obviously that didn't happen. And so maybe we'll have an 11th birthday, or maybe it will be 12th. But basically, so I had worked in a large communications firm prior to starting Think HQ, and I headed up the social marketing team, which is all about working on social change projects. But one of the things that I couldn't come to terms with was that while I was leading the social change of that business, there was a consumer business that was also under the same roof, across the partition, in fact. And so while I was working on, say, a binge drinking project, the consumer team were working on a number of projects with alcohol clients. And I couldn't get over the conflict of ethics, and it's not something that often gets questioned in our industry. So I thought there was an opening to create an agency that was just really clear on its values and that would only work on projects that led to positive social value. So they're the values that we were founded with and sit absolutely core to what we do today, and will always be the case for as long as I'm running the business. So along the way, we started as a PR agency, and we've now expanded out to become a full service advertising and communications business. And I sit now with 42 employees, which I can't quite believe.
Wow.
And because of COVID and the rapid expansion we've had, I actually can't physically sit everybody in this office when we actually come back. So I've actually got to figure out how to accommodate all these new people, but it's been amazing growth. And part of that has been due to one of the businesses that you spoke about, which is Cultureverse. And Cultureverse was a business that I acquired in 2019, so last year. And Cultureverse are a multicultural marketing agency. And the reason why I acquired that business is that I could pretty much see the writing on the wall with any communications challenge, particularly in talking to Victorians in particular. If you don't know how to communicate to the multicultural communities that sit within Victoria, then you're only effectively communicating to about 60 to 70% of Victorians rather than everybody. So I wanted to build the capacity and the ability to present to clients a communication strategy that speaks to everybody. So I'm very, very dedicated to inclusive communications. Multicultural communications is a big part, but we're also building our capacity to speak to people with disability and to also Aboriginal Australians as well.
Fantastic. And what about Lumen? That's the educational part of the business. I read that it's now free. I thought that was quite compelling. I read the blog on your website.
Yeah, so Lumen, we launched in 2017. And I wanted to develop Lumen because obviously with our values, I'd been approached by a lot of smaller not-for-profits and community organisations over the years wanting to work with us. And I'd absolutely had the privilege over the years of working with smaller organisations through third-party grants, you know, whether it's through philanthropy or corporates. But we always came in to do a particular piece of work. So it might be working with them to develop a social media strategy or a fundraising strategy or whatever it may be. But I'd always walk away from that engagement feeling pretty frustrated because there was so much more that they needed to learn and needed to do. So I wanted to create a platform that could bring the agency experience as close to these smaller community organisations as possible and to make it as cost effective as possible. So I had a paywall on it to begin with, and we did generate a little bit of revenue from it, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a compelling enough business model. So what I've ultimately done is made it free for everybody, and I'm looking to commercialise it in a different way now.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it's if you look at your website and talk to you for a little while, I'm sure people will get to know you, is that you're so clear on your values and you put your values at the heart of everything you do, which I think is one of the quotes on your website, and you say unapologetically, and I'm like, that's fantastic. So it's super clear and niche, and I just wonder how did you arrive at these values, and where does it come from? Because you have such passion for helping people and particularly multiculturalism and communications. So where does this all come from?
Good question. Well, I grew up in the country with a single mum and not a lot of money, and I think I've always been aware of the injustices that go on in the community, and so I've always had a really strong social justice bent. And in terms of my career, I started off in a publishing company, and then I moved into a not-for-profit, thinking that that's where I was going to make my change. But it turned out that I actually really love business as well.
Is that conflicting for you? Was that like, I want to help people, but I want to make money as well? Was that a conflict?
Well, this is the thing. I ultimately realised that there was this huge opportunity to work in a profit-making business, but do good at the same time. And a lot of people told me that my business model would never work. And so I'm really proud to be 10 years down the track with 42 employees and doing incredibly well, because it does show you that the model of how you go about running a commercial business doesn't have to stay the same. It can be different. It's really hard work to make it different, but it has meant that I've been able to marry my values and also my love of growing a business as well.
Yeah, and I think you've done it super well. So looking at your profile, I noticed you did some study at Swinburne University, and it was the Graduate Diploma of Entrepreneurship, which I actually did around the same time.
Yeah.
I think we both took a long time to complete it both because we were both running projects at the time. So tell me a bit more about that. How did you find Swinburne? Where did your choice come from? How did you find the course?
Well, I definitely always knew that I wanted to run a business. That was really clear to me since I was a kid. So it got to the point for me in my career where I knew I wanted to do it, but I wasn't sure what it was going to be. So I also I'd done an arts degree as my undergrad, and I feel like I felt like I wanted to learn some more tangible skills around finance in particular, but also marketing and management. And the MEI was so incredibly appealing to me because I'd looked at MBAs and I'd kind of done a lot of theory-based learning before, but what I really wanted to do is I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to hear from people who had done it before. And the MEI was so appealing to me because so many of the teachers have actually been there and done that in terms of starting a business. And the stories that they were able to tell, in addition to the actual academic learning, for me it was 50-50 in terms of benefit. I just got so much out of it. So it was the way that they went about teaching the course and making it very practical. And I also just loved meeting lots and lots of people from different industries as well. I think it really expanded my mind out in terms of who I could be working with or the type of work that I wanted to do. So to me, it was just such a terrific experience. I didn't finish it because, as we were talking earlier, the course was successful for me because I went and started my own business and then I didn't have time to finish it. So job done.
Exactly. It did work. And that was during, a great period. It was a very new course at the time, I remember. Tom McCaskill and Stephen Spring, I still keep in touch with. So how did you find it? Like, was it recommended? Did you find it online?
Gosh, I've had to think back. I think I ultimately just found it online. And then I remember I went to an information session that Tom McCaskill ran. And I was just so inspired and so fired up, and I just wanted to be a part of it. And I went down to part-time in the job that I was in at the time so I could do, a couple of subjects per semester because I just really wanted to get into it and learn. And it was just terrific.
Yeah, I think I did the same thing. I actually went to an information session and then transferred out of my MBA into that. So much to the chagrin of my MBA course, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But so once you graduate, I know you did an undergrad previously. I'm just curious about where this journey started for you because you grew up in the country. So what was your first type of employment? I mean, was there employment before the agency? Was there something that, came from where you grew up in the country or did you head back to the city and start from there?
No, well, I'd left home at 17 to come to Melbourne, and I've always been financially independent since I was 17. So it's been a pretty hard slog. So I've always had to work through university and onwards. So I did my undergrad in politics, and then I took off overseas for a couple of years and ended up living and working in Rome.
Rome, wow.
Yep.
Do tell.
I actually established a pub crawl business with 4 others from around the world, and it turned out to be a hugely successful enterprise.
Who would have thought?
And so much fun, but it really taught me the value. We literally started it from the ground up, so printing out brochures and approaching tourists on the street, encouraging them to meet us at the bottom of the Spanish Steps. And we started off with 0 and 0 and then 2 and then 0 and then 4. And then by the peak of our business over summer, we were getting 250, 300 people.
Wow.
So I learned a lot about people through that time, and it enabled me to live and stay in Rome in my early 20s, which was just the most fantastic experience. So I came home after a couple of years because it kind of wasn't real life at the same time, and I knew that I had to start
Get a real job.
career. And I had no idea where I was going to start. And I saw a newspaper ad to be a writer in an educational publishing company, and I was fortunate enough to secure that job. And in that job, I moved from being a writer to a project manager and then an associate publisher. But the company got bought out by a UK company, and then it became all about making money. And that's when I realized that making money for the sake of making it wasn't never going to be my thing. There had to be something else as part of that. And that's when I moved to my not-for-profit, which was an education not-for-profit. And that's when they used to develop these amazing education resources, but I used to say to them, how are you letting teachers and other people know that you've developed these resources? And their response would be like, oh, well, we don't really do that. We don't do marketing. And I started to really explore the idea of the good stories and things that are good that are happening in the world. How do those people tell their stories to the media? And it turned out that there was just a bit of a gap. And then I discovered the term social marketing. And then I found an agency called Haystack that were just willing to take me on as a communications person to work in this social marketing space, even though I hadn't done any formal training in it. So I've convinced a lot of people along the way to let me into their businesses to do different things. And it's paid off for them, and it's also meant that my career path's been a little bit different as well. So, yeah.
Well, I love the twists and turns of careers take, because they have ups and downs and roundabouts. And often, as Steve Jobs said, you can't see the destination looking forward, but looking back, you can see how perfect those situations were to give you the skills to do what you do now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you formed Think HQ, because it's a big business now, and starting a new business is daunting for a lot of people. So how did that idea come? What was the germ that created that?
Well, so in 2010, I actually founded 2 businesses. So
not just one, but 2, because one's not enough, obviously.
Well, I founded Think HQ in the first instance to essentially replicate the type of business that I was leading at this big firm. So it was effectively a consultancy around social change communications. But in my mind at that time, that was just going to give me a little bit of extra cash so I could go on and grow this other business, which was called Show It Matters. And Show It Matters was a business that I launched with 2 other members of the MEI community.
Oh, there you go. That worked out well.
Yeah, so it actually started as a university assignment and then grew into something bigger. So I ultimately left my job to start both of these businesses and effectively hedged my bets to see which one was going to gain some traction. I was hoping it was going to be MEI because I had visions of being, a tech entrepreneur, because what it was a payroll giving platform. So there was quite a strong technology element to it. Yeah. But things didn't quite turn out.
For everyone else out there, the MEI is the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. That's where that comes from, which is the course. So how did it not work out? What did the founders disagree? Did there's no money there? What was the situation?
I think to summarize it, we never got past it being a good idea. And I think that was the biggest learning for me in doing something very practical coming out of MEI, which is essentially setting up a business, was to really truly understand the difference between a good idea and an actual business. And the difference is whether you can earn any income. And for Show It Matters, we took this product around to so many different stakeholders to get validation, which is what you're always told to do. And everybody was so incredibly polite. You know, in terms of a report back to an investor, I could write, I've met with 100 people and all of them say it's great. But, you know, when I'd meet with investors, they'd then ask me the next question, which is, well, how much money have they given you? And the answer is zero.
It's not.
Yeah. And all that time, in terms of the three founders, we all had very different priorities and understanding of and levels of commitment. So, you know, there was one founder who had a family and really wasn't willing to leave his secure job until the company was up and running and making money. The other founder had a consultancy, which means he was kind of ducking in and out. And in the end, we weren't particularly aligned, the three of us, with where we wanted to go. So, you know, I tried to keep this thing alive for a good couple of years. I ended up winning a business pitching competition and went over to Berkeley to do a venture. It was an executive certificate in venture capitalism.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was there for a week and we heard from venture capitalists and angel investors and service providers. And it was actually after that week that I realized, you know what, this is not real. It's what Show It Matters is, it's not a real business, and it's time to let it go. And I think I had a really strong emotional tie to wanting to make it work. But in reality, I just ultimately didn't have the passion for it.
I was going to say, it doesn't really align with your core values as you're so clear on today. And maybe that's why Think HQ sort of took priority and you moved more into that space.
Yeah, I mean, it was a payroll giving platform that was going to link corporates with charities. So it did have that values alignment, but at the end of the day, technology was at the core of it, and that's not my passion. So, and, you know, I got back from Berkeley and realised that I'd already employed, I think, 2 or 3 people in at Think HQ by that time, and I just hadn't even seen what was right in front of me. So as soon as I got back from that trip, it was like, I'm now dedicated to Think HQ and I can see where this can go, and this is what I need to focus my energies on. And I
love it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we learn as much from the downsides as we do from the upsides, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Now,
thinking of the downsides in 2020, because it's been a challenging year for everybody. So what's been the most challenging thing for you, do you think? I know you told me that you lost a few contracts at the start. Tell me a bit more about that and then how we've pivoted to go into the success, because that's an amazing turnaround from losing most of your clients to employing a bunch more people. Tell me more a bit about that.
Yeah, so March was an incredibly confronting and terrifying time. I think as it was for everybody, but business owners in particular, to have all those contracts cancel in a week. I could see in front of me 10 years of incredibly hard work just disappearing in front of my eyes. And I was so stressed. I had just clumps of hair coming out, you know, in the shower. I just don't think I'd been under that level of stress ever. Because I think one of the skills that you've got as a business owner is to be able to not see into the future, but at least try to plan for all these different scenarios and work your way around them. And then when something like a global pandemic hits, it's like, what do I do? Like, how do I, there's no rule book for this. I have no idea. And I felt incredibly helpless. I'd also come off the back of a really poor January and February. So in terms of cash flow, like I was already up against it. Because of the bushfires, actually, I'd had a couple of contracts cancelled because of the bushfires. I was going to do a physical roadshow through, you know, country New South Wales and country Queensland, and that got cancelled. So for a couple of weeks, I was verging on catatonic. I was just, I couldn't think straight. I was terrified, and probably even more confronting was the juxtaposition of when I walk into my workplace and I realized that nobody else in the business kind of got what was happening.
The
So
seriousness,
I'd see all these happy faces, and I'd just think to myself, gosh, you guys you can't see kind of the challenge that we're up for. Like this is going to be huge in terms of a fight. So yeah, after a couple of weeks, I did make a very conscious decision. Like, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down swinging like I've never fought before. I will fight this until the very end. And, you know, I made a really difficult decision to make 4 people redundant. You know, and that's, in the history of the business, I'd probably made, you know, maybe 7 other people redundant. So to make 4 people redundant in one go was just totally devastating. But I knew that I had to consolidate. And once I could consolidate, I could look in the eye of everybody that I had to say, all right, as a team, we're going to get through this, and I'm going to make this commitment to you that I will do absolutely everything in my power to get us through to the other side. And so, yeah, I just started calling everybody I knew in terms of clients and potential clients. And it just so happened that I'd already been speaking with the Victorian government around this new inclusive offering and communicating to multicultural communities. And in the end, we ended up securing the contract to communicate COVID, you know, in 57 different languages to the Victorian community. And we've been working on that since March, and that's an ongoing contract. But then also, one of the amazing things that happened is that I noticed a lot of clients who I hadn't worked with for 4, 5 or 6 years, they all came forward wanting to work with us. And it almost felt like people were doing what they could to support us and to make sure that we were still in work. And, you know, I think that's a benefit of being around for 10 years and having the values that we do, because obviously the messaging at the moment is strongly around messages of substance, mental health, domestic violence, you know, kind of all the serious stuff. And, you know, to have that support has just been amazing. And then to be able to grow and employ people who have been made unemployed. You know, I wish I could employ 200 people at the moment, but that's been such a great feeling. And we've added some amazing people to the team this year, and that's been the best bit.
Yeah, look, I really appreciate you sharing that remarkable story, because there's a lot of people out there, business owners that are struggling or have had to close their business. And, you know, the power of that decision, you know, you can either go down or you can go down swinging. And I love that phrase. And what I loved is that your pivot came from reaching out to your network and people who knew you were ready and knew you were an authentic, you know, entrepreneur, someone who is a champion for social justice. And I think that's, you know, your brand, and that's why people want to work with you and want you to be successful. And look what you've done now. You're employing, you're doing really well, and you know, you look great. So obviously you're recovering with your hair, which is great.
It grew back.
It grew back.
I definitely need a holiday, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get one.
As
soon.
We all do. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I really appreciate you sharing your story. This is you know, been an amazing interview. And one final question. Let's just imagine that, you know, people from the alumni are sitting with you and they just want one piece of final advice of how to thrive during COVID. Now, what would that be? What would you give as your parting piece of advice?
I think chaos, and it's a cliche, so I understand that I'm going to wheel out a cliche. But cliches exist often because they're true. There is so much opportunity in chaos. So I think it's been exhausting, and the uncertainty has been quite traumatic for a lot of people. But there's actually just so much opportunity at the moment, not only to grow different areas of a business, but to change how you've been operating. Because you don't often get the opportunity to have everything kind of shaken up, I guess, and how it lands is your opportunity. So I think just while it's still chaotic and while we still have all these unknowns, just get in there and do something different. Because it's actually a good time for it.
Yeah, it's the mindset, isn't it? It's a change of mindset from crisis to what could I do about it? What's the opportunity? Which is that decision, and comes down to a lot of mental health, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Jen, I appreciate you sharing your incredible story. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of that. I admire your courage and resilience during these really difficult times, and I'm sure that you'll continue to be successful in the future. For those in the audience, please join Jen and I for an online Q&A. We're going to be doing it on the Swinburne alumni LinkedIn group. So you just need to Google Swinburne University of Technology alumni, or look that up on LinkedIn and join in the group, and we'll be able to answer some questions there. And next week, we have the impressive John Delamotte, the CEO of Compass Education, who against all COVID odds has grown his business and expanded globally, believe it or not, during the pandemic. And we look forward to seeing you all for episode 3, Global Growth During Lockdown, and we'll see you next week.